Today we are going to demonstrate how to make up a rubber brake hose from a sample using a TAE500 machine to specification. We receive our sample. Step number one is to measure our sample next to a rule or tape measure and record this length on our testing certificate to check once it's been assembled, measures up correctly or very close to. Secondly, we need to identify the fittings. Step number one, in our catalog, we can check first fitting against images and compare. And in this case, we have an E50, which looks very similar to our fitting M10 by 1. We can take our fitting out of stock to check shortly. Then we need to check the other side. We then see that this is a female fitting on the sample, and we go to the female section of fittings in our catalog. And again we compare, and we can see in this instance a WC47 M10 by 1 looks very similar to our fitting. We can take it out of our stock. Next, we have to check that the threads are correct. We can then take these fittings and screw them on to check, or a thread gauge if you have one, to just make sure that the thread pitches are correct. We can also see inside the female whether it is a single flare or a double flare. In this case, it has an inverted flare, double flare, and we can see in our catalog it shows double flare. So we are assured that this is the correct fitting to make up this assembly. We can now proceed to making up the brake hose. We start by ensuring that the hose that we are going to use has been cut square and is a clean cut. We place the first fitting onto the hose, and we very importantly mark its elongation. We place this fitting down at 0, and we place the second fitting down at the 285 millimeter as per the sample's measurement we took in the beginning, and we mark behind the hex for its cut length. We can now confidently cut the hose with our special TAE500 cutter, which is designed with a very sharp blade and to cut right through the hose, ensuring a square, true, clean cut. The next step is to, with our insert tool, we place the fitting on, which then gets put upside down in the crimper. Close the valve, crimp up. Make sure the hex is below the crimping surfaces, and we can rest the insert tool on the top of the dies and bring the dies up to just hold the fitting. We then remove our insert tool, and we can take our cut hose length into the fitting and make sure it's bottomed, and just make sure that elongation mark is still visible. We can now proceed to crimp. The crimper is such that you will feel a positive stop, which is at the crimping 10.5 millimeter specification. If you find it's a little tight, you can just press it with your fingers to open the jaws, and then we must measure critically. So we have measured, in this case, 10.5 millimeters with our cutout vernier in the bell of the fitting across sides. 10.5 millimeters. We also need to, very importantly, check our elongation, and in this case is 2 millimeters. We can record this, 10.5 millimeters, and elongation was 2 millimeters. We can now proceed to the second fitting. Again, we put the fitting onto the insert tool, upside down into our crimper, close the valve, again to the point where we can rest our insert tool on the top of the dowels and bring our dowels to, again, just hold the fitting. You do not want to crimp it because it will crimp your tool in the fitting. Remove it, which also keeps your fitting flush with the dowels. We can now insert the hose into the second side's fitting, and again, very importantly, is marking elongation. We can now proceed to crimp. Again, we crimp until we can feel the positive stop. And we can release. Again, if it's a little tight, you can just press it with your fingers to release completely. We now again need to check the critical checks, these critical measurements. In the bell with our cutout vernier, 10.5 millimeters. So we must record that, 10.5 millimeters. We check our elongation, must not exceed 2.5 millimeters. In this case again, 2 millimeters. Okay, we can then check our overall length, and we have now got 289 millimeters. We record this length on our certificate as it is 4 millimeters longer than the original sample. 4 millimeters is absolutely acceptable for a brake hose. Longer, always longer, but never shorter. So we can note that hose 4 millimeters longer than sample. Okay. We then have to check either by compressor or by mouth that the hose is free of blockage. We can now confidently sign. This was tested by Grant, and confidently sign it off. We have our training manual, which is a step-for-step guide as per in this demonstration, showing all the features of crimping and assembling a safety critical part to sample using kinetic, brake hose and fittings. 10.5 millimeters and blow through your hose. I thank you very much and hope you will enjoy making up brake hoses and sending out quality product. Thank you.